Even when Chairman Tenenbaum made her first visit to Toy Fair in 2010, she was no stranger to issues surrounding the safety of children's products. Her background with children and family services, her practice in health, environmental, and public interest law, and her experience with legislation related to public health, the environment, child welfare, social services, adult and juvenile corrections, state military affairs, local government, and public school finance has been extraordinarily helpful in preparing her for the job that she now has at hand. She's been a long-time advocate for children and families. Now, Chairman Tenenbaum serves as the nation's chief safety official. She was nominated by President Obama and appointed by the Senate in 2009. And as you can imagine, much of her first several years was dedicated to understanding the issues surrounding the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, as has been our work these past several years, and the efforts of the toy industry to comply with the Act's varied requirements. Chairman Tenenbaum, and let me say on a personal note, it has been my privilege to accompany the chairman and a CPSC delegation on a number of tours and activities around the world. And I can testify firsthand that the chairman has taken her job seriously in terms of being dedicated to the safety of consumer products, and in particular the safety of products for children. And she takes the job seriously on the basis of what is right for children and what is right for consumers. This is good government in action, and it is a real privilege for me to introduce to you Chairman Inez Tenenbaum.
Well, good morning, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. Carter, that introduction was so nice that it was my Valentine from you, so I appreciate that. It's great to be back at the American International Toy Fair. I was here in 2010 and was amazed at the size of the fair, and it looks like the Toy Fair 2012 is even bigger. And I'm also amazed at the size of this lectern, so I hope everyone can see me. And it's great. The lighting is wonderful, so if no one can hear or see me, just raise your hand. With nearly 100,000 products on display and attendees from more than 100 countries, this is the place to be in New York City today. And as part of our commitment to the outreach and education, the CPSC staff and I plan to walk the showroom today as we did yesterday, and we want to meet as many of you as possible. We take great pride in being accessible at the CPSC. We want to get to know you and your company, and we want to support you in complying with all the U.S. toy requirements. Yesterday, Dean Woodard and Neil Cohen and our compliance and field operations staff were here, and they walked around and talked to you, and I hope they were very helpful in answering questions, so we want to do that again this morning. So I appreciate, Carter, the opportunity to speak to the Toy Fair again this year. It's always welcomed and invitation, and when I was here in 2010, I spoke about the responsibility of the product safety regulators to ensure that all toy hazards, including small parts, toxic metals, and dangerous magnets, are addressed by the manufacturers. During the past 2 years, I believe that the CPSC has continued to uphold our responsibility and solidify our role as the leader in promoting compliance and best practices in the world. In carrying out our role, we have not acted unilaterally. Rather, we have favored multilateral collaboration. We've collaborated with the ASTM, our Chinese counterparts at the AQSIQ, Health Canada, and the European Commission, the TIA, and consumer groups. Toy safety is a year-round effort at the CPSC. Therefore, we will continue to work with foreign regulators and the toy industry throughout 2012. From Hong Kong to China to the United States, I'm seeing the trend lines for toy industry pointing in the right direction. I believe I'm in a good position to make such an assessment as I traveled to Hong Kong last month to address the Hong Kong Toy and Game Fair. And from what I've seen firsthand, the state of toy safety is strong, and it's getting stronger, thanks in large part to the action of many of you in this room. To support my assessment of the industry, let's look at the data. 2011 represented the third consecutive year that toy recalls declined in the United States. And I applaud all the manufacturers, the suppliers, the importers, and the labs that complied with CPSC's requirements and did their part to put safer toys in the hands of America's children. Between October 2010 and September 2011, there were 34 toy recalls, mostly related to choking and lacerations hazards to young children. The 34 recalls last year represented a drop in the number of recalls from 46 in 2010 to 50 in 2009 and 172 in 2008, a year that we must never repeat. Lead violations that resulted in recalls also remained low. There were only 4 recalls for lead violations in 2011 as compared to 19 in 2008. Now, I think that's great news. The toy industry, however, still has more work to do because the CPSC and Homeland Security inspectors at the U.S. ports continue to detect and detain shipments that contain violative toys. I warned about this in 2010, and I need to warn about it again, that there are some bad actors who are importing dangerous toys simply for profits. These shady companies often show little or no regard for the rules or for the safety of children. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that I'm preaching to the choir today. I know you and your companies, and I know that you are working hard to comply with the CPSIA and other requirements. But let me just share with you some of the enforcement actions that we've taken over the past few years that are unfortunate for the toy industry because these are the bad actors that we continue to catch. Just days after I spoke here in 2010, the CPSC levied a $2 million civil penalty against Dazo Company for importing toys that violated the CPSIA's lead limit, lead content, and phthalates limits. Dazo's actions were completely unacceptable. They repeatedly ignored letters of advice from the CPSC to stop importing violative toys. And as a result, Dazo had to sign a consent decree that prevented them from being an importer of children's products into the United States until they demonstrated to us that the company had procedures in place to ensure compliance with the CPSC safety standards and testing requirements. In January 23rd of this year, the Justice Department filed charges against Huing Long, Isabella Young, and 3 South Florida corporations. These defendants were charged with conspiracy to smuggle hazardous toys containing small parts and violative lead levels into the United States through the Port of Miami. Last March, we secured an injunction against the importer LM that was similar to the injunction against Dazo. So there has been tremendous cooperation in this case among the CPSC, Customs and Border Protection, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and the Justice Department. The defendants are alleged to have made false statements on customs declarations forms, which is a serious charge. So with the new resources and technologies aimed at identifying high-risk shipments as they are in transit from Hong Kong or Shanghai, we are getting better and better at sampling and seizing violative products. Now, I know that you don't want that action that you and I don't want the action of a few bad importers to cast the entire industry into a bad light. And I do not want this to happen to all of you who are the good actors. So let's work together to ensure that only those who are willing and able to play by the rules remain in business in producing toys. Now, from what I've seen, the majority of the toy industry has made great progress in recent years. Quality assurance, quality control systems, and adherence to U.S. safety standards have improved. But we cannot let our guard down. And I was just having this conversation before I made this speech. It's every day you have to stay on it. You can't let your guard down. Because the customers here in the United States, the largest trading market in the world, have high expectations that imported toys will be compliant with the CPSC's toy safety rules. And I have those same expectations, as I know all of you do too. So that we can make 2012 the best year in toy safety and build a toy safety system that will last, I want to focus on 3 areas during the balance of my time with you this morning. First, I want to talk about the CPSIA. I'll give you an update on all the latest developments of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act and the amendments to the Act that were signed into law. And secondly, I want to talk about safety by design. I will discuss ways that the toy companies can ensure that they meet the CPSC's rules and requirements by ensuring that they are designed safely. And finally, I want to talk about education and prevention. I will talk about the CPSC's renewed effort to be a regulator that favors education and prevention over reaction and recall. So let's start with the discussion about the Consumer Product Safety Act, or the CPSIA. I trust that everyone in the room knows about this sweeping U.S. child safety law that established some of the lowest lead paint and lead content limits in the world of toys. Paint is set at 90 parts per million of lead, and total lead content is set at 100 parts per million. The drop down to 100 parts per million for lead content became effective prospectively on August the 14th, 2011. The law also bans toys from being made or sold with more than 1,000 parts per million of 6 different phthalates. There is a panel of scientific experts who are researching the 3 of the 6 banned phthalates, as well as the safety of chemical alternatives. And we are hoping that we will receive their report in just a few months, and we're very hopeful it'll be by the end of April. I trust that all of you are aware that the CPSIA turned the longest-standing voluntary toy standard, ASTM F963, into a mandatory federal toy safety standard. Except for the drop down to 100 parts per million lead limit for total content, all of the requirements that I've cited have been in place for more than 2 years. I support these rules because they are paying off. The payoff is seen in increased consumer confidence and increased efforts of overseas manufacturers to move away from harmful metals and chemicals. Now, here is the big news. On January 1st, the CPSC lifted the 2-year-old stays of enforcement for testing and certification requirements for lead content, phthalates, and ASTM F963. The headline from the CPSC is that independent third-party testing is now required, and it's in effect for those important toy safety rules. I recognize that some of you may be unfazed by this news. That's because many retailers have required their suppliers to adhere to and test to these rules even when the stays of enforcement were in place. Yet everyone should understand that with the stays lifted, imported and domestic manufactured toys may not reach their intended destination if they are not accompanied by a certificate of compliance. This certificate is the golden ticket that the CPSC port inspectors and field inspectors, importers and retailers are looking for to ensure that toys that you make and sell are suitable for the hands of children. I applaud those of you at this fair who conducted the first-party conformance testing. However, the law now calls for toys to also be third-party tested. If you need to know which laboratories are accredited to test to these requirements, log on to cpsc.gov, where we have an easy-to-use searchable database. The other new development that I'm pleased to share with you is that thanks to the leadership of many of you in this room, the ASTM F963 subcommittee approved the 2011 version of their standard last December. Under the CPSIA, my fellow commissioners and I can accept this new version of the voluntary standard and turn it to an updated mandatory standard. In fact, when I return to the CPSC's headquarters tomorrow, my fellow commissioners and I will take that vote. And if tomorrow's vote passes, then F963-11 will become a mandatory standard in June. This revised standard is a net positive for the industry and for the safety of children. Since it was created through a voluntary consensus process that included many members and leaders of the toy industry, I trust that it should not be a cause for confusion. Assuming that the CPSC accepts the new version of the standard, and if you ever tune into commission meetings, you can never be sure, we will issue new notices of requirements, which will provide you with guidance on how to test to the new or upgraded requirements. Neil Cohen, the CPSC's outstanding small business ombudsman, will talk to you about some of the specifics of the new standard during his presentation, so you'll get the details of the new standard. A new upgrade that is especially noteworthy is the limit on cadmium and other toxic metals in surface coating and substrates. For the past 2 years, I've been warning manufacturers about substituting cadmium and other toxic metals in place of lead. I am thankful that the TIA and the Fashion Jewelry and Accessories Trade Association were all supportive of new ASTM voluntary standards for cadmium and other toxic metals for surface coatings and substrates of toys and children's jewelry. At my urging, the ASTM F963 subcommittee and a separate children's jewelry subcommittee approved these voluntary standards last December. I appreciate the determination that both subcommittees displayed in carrying out their work. Toys and children's jewelry will be safer thanks to their efforts. Now, I think all of that is forward progress. Knowing the specific standards and testing requirements to deal with various hazards is very important because standards and testings are the foundations of the CPSIA. In October 2011, the Commission approved a rule requiring continuous third-party testing for all toys and children's products. The third-party testing requirement is an achievement of CPSC's work on the CPSIA. The rule furthers CPSC's efforts to create a stronger safety framework, a framework designed to ensure the safety of toys and children's products before they get into the hands of children, no matter where they live. So let's say after you begin making a new toy, there is a material change introduced during the manufacturing process. Maybe you've changed your paint supplier or your plastic supplier, and that would be a material change under the law. Should the child who ends up with playing with the toy manufacturer after the material change have to serve as an unwitting tester to whether it's potentially made this toy unsafe? I say absolutely not, and I trust that all of you would agree with me. Well, our continuous testing rule is intended to ensure that there's a high level of assurance that a particular toy complies with all the pertinent safety requirements. Now that compliance is maintained during the entire production life of a toy and any safety issues are discovered before the product goes out of the factory door, not after it ends up into a child's hands. This rule goes into effect early next year, but I am confident that all of you are committed to providing children with the highest level of safety in their toys this year and beyond. It's important to note that on the same day the CPSC approved the continuous testing rule, we also approved the final component part testing rule. And I recognize fully that component part testing may not work in every situation, but I hope that it will provide beneficial relief to many of you. For the past few years, my fellow commissioners and I have been advocating that the U.S. toy and children's product companies push the responsibility for testing way upstream. Well, upstream means Hong Kong. Upstream means Guangzhou. When I was in China last month, I advocated that suppliers of paints and parts and accessories do the right thing and certify that their components meet the U.S. safety requirements so that you all can buy that component and rely on their certification in manufacturing your products. This means this benefits downstream in the form of reduced cost, and it will be significant to you. However, safety will not be sacrificed. Again, we're pursuing an approach to provide relief without sacrificing safety. In August 2011, Congress approved and the President signed into law amendments to certain parts of the CPSIA. And these were a long time in coming, and a great deal of debate went on both at the Commission and Congress before they considered this legislation. But what's important to note that Congress did not overhaul CPSIA in regard to the independent third-party testing, nor did it back away from the stringent lead limits in children's products. What it did was establish a pathway for small batch manufacturers to gain some relief from some of the third-party testing requirements. Neil Cohen will talk more about the small batch registry, which we put up on the website recently, which we implemented in December 2011 to provide qualified companies, some of whom will be at this fair, with some degree of relief. Congress also made sure that the 100 parts per million total lead limit was applied prospectively for products manufactured after they passed the law, and not retroactively for manufacturers, retailers, and resellers, which would require compliant products to be taken off the shelves. I fully supported this prospective application of the 100 parts per million. Now, inaccessible component parts were also excluded from the phthalates testing requirements by the CPSIA amendments. And I know that this change provided many of your industry with relief. I know there's still a lot of questions about what is inaccessible, and we'll get to that as we work through the small batch and also the phthalate rules at the Commission. In addition, Congress asked the agency to seek public comments on ways to reduce the third-party testing burdens. Industry had talked to Congress, they talked to us, and Congress said, all right, CPSC, look for ways that you can reduce the burden of third-party testing and still allow companies to come into compliance. So the companies and the TIA have submitted their comments. We're going through those comments, and we will be looking at ways to reduce the burden of testing. Now, I am sure that the CPSIA has presented certain challenges to the toy industry. In fact, I heard from many of you as I walked the floor 2 years ago about the questions you had, the issues you had, and I know that it has been very, very challenging. I believe your motivation to comply with the law should continue to be the same as the CPSC's motivation to implement the law, nevertheless, and that is a desire to keep children safe while at play. Now, many of the toys on display at this fair are ingenious, and eventually they'll end up in a retail store or online. Take the necessary steps now to ensure that those toys comply with the CPSIA so that the children are safe and happy when those toys reach their hands. It's not just the law, it's the right thing to do. And it's the right thing to do also for your company. No one wants to suffer injury to their brand and to their company. And we're here to work with you because we don't want to see your brand name suffer as well. So let me transition from talking about the rules and requirements and what they are to talking about ways that the toy companies can ensure that they meet our rules and requirements by ensuring that all products are designed safely. In 2008, 2 researchers from Western Canada published a paper analyzing about 600 toy recalls announced in the United States over a 20-year period of time. Hari Bapuji and Paul Beamish found that, quote, the number of defects attributable to design issues was much higher than those attributable to manufacturing problems, end of quote. In fact, 71% of the toy recalls that they analyzed were related to design problems and not complying to rules and regulations. It was the design that caused the recall. Bapuji and Beamish stated that a design problem is reflected in the sharp edges of a toy, which poses a laceration hazard. Another common design problem is a small detachable part, such as balls and beads, which pose a swallowing and a choking hazard. Another example of design flaws includes open tubes and spaces which can entrap a child's body parts, long strings that pose a strangulation hazard, and sewn button and glued eyes on stuffed toys as opposed to buttonless clothing for toys and embroidered eyes. The researchers added, a design problem would result in an unsafe toy irrespective of where it was manufactured, whether it was manufactured in China or the U.S. On the other hand, a manufacturing defect arises because of a manufacturer's error or negligence. If a toy's design is good, it does not necessarily mean that the toys produced will be good. By contrast, if the design is poor, the toys manufactured will definitely be faulty. End of their quote. The researchers made 2 suggestions. First, to ensure that the accountability of toy companies to improve their product designs, and second, encourage the development of global standards to enhance product safety. We already know that the standards have been enhanced, so the focus needs to be on building safety into the design of your toys. This is especially important for your industry because offerings of new designs to your distributors and customers change so frequently. And with nearly $20 billion of toys imported from China into the United States every year, the final design has to be right every time. Now, before manufacturing and assembly starts, it is vital that toy companies design out potential health and safety risks into each and every model. Here are some examples of what I mean. If you are making electronic toys that use button batteries, your design must ensure that the children cannot have access to those batteries. Button batteries in toys and in certain adult products emerged last year as a public health issue in the U.S. due to the rise of incidents of children swallowing these toxic batteries. There's actually an international cooperation aimed at addressing this hazard. The World Health Organization is sponsoring a global health and safety conference later this year, and they're looking for research papers from engineers with ideas to reduce child exposure to button batteries. So if you have a research paper, send it to them. Hopefully, the ideas generated by the WHO conference can help your industry develop even better designs for electronic toys. Another important factor concerns the metals and chemicals used in your plastics, your surface coatings, and substrates. Safety by design means ensuring that your specs are very clear about not including lead, cadmium, antimony, chromium, and other toxic metals. Put it in the specs that those chemicals won't be accepted. And there cannot be more than 1,000 parts per million of 6 types of phthalates in your plastic, because anything above that level is banned. So during my time at the Hong Kong Toy Fair, I learned that the Hong Kong Toy Council has developed a special database, a database that prevents chemicals from being used in their toys that do not comply with the U.S. and the European requirements. Now that's another sign of progress. New software was developed that keeps up with every chemical that goes into a toy by the Chinese manufacturers. Adhering to the ASTM F963 and the CPSA in your designs is good for business and good for the health and the safety of children everywhere. Another key to a safe design is proper age grading of your toys. Parents and grandparents certainly have an obligation to provide age-appropriate toys to young children. But when consumers look at the age grading on the package, it should reflect who the toy is designed for, as well as the best science and age determinations. As I stated earlier, we continue to find small parts violations and choking hazards in toys seized at the import or that are recalled after they make it into the marketplace. Small balls, small parts, or protruding parts are acute hazards in toys, and these hazards are not only lead to recalls, but they can also be the cause of deaths and hospitalizations. As a result, every precaution should be taken to design out these risks. I believe that safety by design can be a winning approach to the toy industry to incorporate. Now, the toy companies can aim for the highest level of standards in their design specifications, while the CPSC and AQSIQ keep working to promote best manufacturing practices in China. We can achieve something great. The entire toy industry can reach a level of superior quality, conformance, and customer satisfaction if it embraces safety by design. Now, the third topic I want to discuss this morning is education and prevention. As Carter told you, I spent many of my years working for the South Carolina General Assembly, as well as being State Superintendent of Education. So education is very near and dear to me, as well as prevention. So with each new year come new parents who need to be educated on making safe purchases and being aware of the risk of toys. Informing parents and consumers about buying the right toy for the right age child has been a constant part of the CPSC's work for more than 2 decades. I want to stress, however, that we still have work to do in educating everyone in the industry. Just a few weeks ago, I was reading in a Los Angeles Times story that shows we still have work to do. The writer was visiting Toy Town in Los Angeles and spoke with importers and distributors. The writer approached the owner of a small toy store who was stocking up for the holiday sales, and the writer asked how he knew the items he was purchasing were safe. He replied, "I don't know." Yes, he actually says, "I don't know." The toy store owner then told the reporter that he holds the toy district wholesaler responsible for passing along toys that meet U.S. safety standards. So the reporter asked the wholesaler how he knows that the toys are safe. He went to the wholesaler. When the container arrives in the harbor, it gets inspected. If it's not safe, it won't be released to the public, was his response. Now, these answers concern me. If you've ever been to a port and you see the thousands of containers that come into the port. And if you think the CPSC is inspecting every one of them, then you should be concerned too. Now, the CPSC needs everyone in the supply chain to understand that the new toy safety requirements and to be able to communicate them downstream is very important. It's important to us. It's important to the public. The CPSC is working very hard to keep the consumer confidence up in the safety of toys that are in the marketplace. We're constantly telling people that compliance is higher, toys are safer. Parents can have confidence in the toys because they've been tested. But we can't do this alone. We want to be an advocate for you and toy safety as well. From manufacturers to importers, from wholesalers to retailers, I want everyone to know and talk about the independent third-party testing requirements and the certificate of conformity requirements. I want everyone to know and be able to talk about the lead limit and the lead paint limits, cadmium limits, the limits on phthalates, and the mandatory toy standard. Now, you may not agree with all of these safety requirements, and they are onerous and they are very complicated. But to keep the nearly $23 billion worth of toys in the U.S. moving, it is vital to know about these requirements and comply with them. There's also the wholesaler's comments. When the container arrives in the harbor, it gets inspected. If it's not safe, it won't be released to the public. Well, we have a strong presence at the ports, and it's stronger than ever before. And we have and we're seeking additional funds from Congress to hire more staff at our ports. But I don't want consumers to be misled into thinking that we are anywhere close to having the capacity to inspect every shipment of toy, as I said, that arrives in a U.S. port. That is a vision we have, but it does not reflect the current reality. The reality is the responsibility starts with the manufacturer and the exporter, a responsibility not to cut corners when it comes to complying with our requirements. So if you fail to send a new toy to a third-party lab, or fail to produce a legitimate certificate, or fail to adhere to the ASTM F963 standard, there are going to be consequences. Your product may be stopped at the import. It will be rejected by the importer, rejected by the retailer, caught by the CPSC in the market, or potentially recalled at a consumer level. And I don't want any of this to happen to you or your company, and that is why I'm here today. I'm here to educate, I'm here to inform and empower you to take the necessary steps to ensure that your products flow through the stream of commerce and reach your customers. So in closing, I'd like to emphasize that there are three areas I spoke to you about this morning: the CPSIA requirements, the concept of safety by design, and educating everyone in the supply chain. They all have something in common. They all contribute to the CPSC's strategic approach aimed at promoting prevention. I believe that prevention must win out over reaction. From manufacturing and distribution, the toy industry and the CPSC should continue to work cooperatively to prevent injuries from by getting it right from the start. If you get it right from the start, there won't be injuries, there won't be recalls. Now, I predict that 2012 will be another successful year in toy safety, especially if everyone rallies around this approach. There will always be some injuries with toys that we cannot prevent. There will be thousands of injuries that we cannot prevent by designing in safety and designing out defects. Superior designs and fewer manufacturing defects will lead to fewer seizures at U.S. ports and also result in fewer recalls. I want both of these statistics to decline this year, injuries and recalls, and it can only happen if attention continues to be focused on safety issues. I know that the industry is up for the challenge. I just know you are, and you've met so many challenges, and you can go forward, and I know that you are up to working with us on this challenge. And I know that each of you is up to the challenge because many of your companies already have a mission that is committed to safety, injury prevention, and the well-being of your customers. From New York to Hong Kong and everywhere in between, I want us to be partners in promoting the new toy safety rules and partners in preventing toy-related deaths and injuries. And as a wave of safe, compliant toys reach store shelves in American homes, I trust that we can achieve our shared vision. A vision of children happy and safe at play with smiling parents watching over them. Let's do the work now that is needed to achieve this vision through 2012 and beyond. Thank you all for your time today. I appreciate your attention, and congratulations to the Toy Industry Association for organizing another great toy fair. Thank you.